The snow was silent, except for the crunch of boots and the whisper of wind crawling across the mountain. The search team moved carefully through the drifts, eyes scanning for anything, any sign of 9 missing hikers. Then they saw it. A tent, half buried, torn open from the inside. Inside, sleeping bags were empty. Food still neatly laid out. And footprints, barefoot, led away into the black forest. 9 young adventurers had vanished into the frozen wilderness. And what was found next would become one of the most chilling mysteries of the modern world. True Nightmares, the Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959. It's February 1959, deep in Soviet Russia, at the northern edge of the Ural Mountains. A place so remote, so unforgiving, the locals had given it a name that whispered of death. Kolatshakal, the mountain of the dead. Temperatures dropped below -25. Winds howled like distant screams. But for 9 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, it was the ultimate challenge. A test of skill, of courage, of youth. They were all in their 20s, smart, proud, and loyal to each other. They believed in order, discipline, adventure. And like all great explorers, they believed they were invincible. They had no way of knowing the mountain they were climbing would soon claim them all. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, methodical, calculating, a born leader with an engineer's mind and a perfectionist's heart. Beside him was Zenaida Kolmogorova, spirited, optimistic, full of laughter. Her diary was filled with jokes, sketches, and notes about her friends. Ludmila Dubinina, the strong-willed realist. She complained often in her journal, but she never gave up. Rostam Slobodin, the athlete, quick, determined. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, the quiet intellectual. Yuri Doroshenko, brave and impulsive. Alexander Kolovatov, careful, logical, curious. Semyon Zolotaryov, the older one, a veteran and a mystery to the others. And finally, Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker, who would fall ill and turn back early. He didn't know it then, but that decision would save his life. In photographs, they're smiling, young faces, bundled in heavy coats, frozen breath rising in laughter. 9 friends chasing a dream. Unaware they were walking straight into history's coldest mystery. January 27th. The group boards a train headed north. They sing songs, tease each other, snap photos. Every moment carefully documented. They are disciplined, but happy. The kind of happiness that comes from a sense of purpose. Their goal: reach the peak of Otterton Mountain. A multi-day trek through dense forest, frozen rivers, and uncharted snowfields. They move with precision, recording every stop, every meal, every storm. On February 1st, they make a decision that puzzles experts even today. They set up camp on the exposed slope of Kolatshakal instead of descending into the forest for shelter. Why? Maybe it was Dyatlov's determination, maybe exhaustion, or maybe fate simply guided them to that spot. That night, they pitched their tent, cooked dinner, wrote in their diaries, and went to sleep. Zenaida's final note reads, "We are getting tired, but the mood is good." It would be the last thing any of them ever wrote. Days turned into weeks. Families expected telegrams, but none arrived. On February 20th, volunteers, students, and soldiers began the search. The weather was brutal. Visibility near zero. But after 6 days of searching, a rescuer spotted something in the snow. A tent, half buried, leaning on its collapsed frame. What they found inside made no sense. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. 9 sleeping bags left behind. Boots, coats, food, even Dyatlov's flashlight, left burning faintly on top of the snow. Whatever happened made them run into the night without shoes, without jackets, and without reason. The rescuers followed the tracks downhill. 8 or 9 distinct sets of footprints. They led toward the forest, then vanished under fresh snow. At the edge of the woods, they found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko, lying beside the remains of a small fire, barefoot, dressed only in underwear. Their hands burned, as if they'd tried desperately to feed the fire with branches until the end. Nearby, the bark of a cedar tree was stripped clean, 15 feet high, as if someone had tried to climb it, maybe searching for something, or trying to escape. Between the forest and the tent, 3 more were found: Dyatlov, Zenaida, and Rustem. Their poses suggested they were crawling, trying to return to the tent. Then for 2 months, nothing. Until May. Under 13 feet of snow, in a ravine deeper in the forest, they found the remaining 4 hikers. Their injuries shocked investigators. One had a fractured skull, another broken ribs, as if crushed by immense pressure. Ludmila's eyes were gone, her tongue missing. Their clothes contained traces of radiation. No evidence of another person, no animal tracks, no signs of struggle. 9 dead. 9 impossible explanations. The Dyatlov Pass investigation became one of the strangest in modern history. Every theory solved one piece, but created 2 more. The avalanche theory. Investigators claimed a snow slab collapsed onto the tent, forcing them to flee half-dressed into the night. It fit some facts: sudden panic, rapid flight. But the slope was too shallow. The tent was still visible the next morning, undisturbed, and footprints were clean and intact for over a mile. Avalanches destroy. This scene looked preserved. The military test theory. Some say they stumbled into a secret Soviet experiment. Parachute mines, sound weapons, radiation from nearby testing sites. The theory grew after early reports mentioned orange spheres in the sky that same night. Locals saw glowing lights above the mountain. Photographs recovered from the hikers' cameras showed strange streaks of light just before they died. Then came the cover-ups. Files sealed, witnesses silenced. The official report: death caused by an unknown, compelling force. The hypnothermic paranoia theory. As hypothermia sets in, the mind begins to fracture. Victims feel disoriented, even hot. They start stripping off clothing, a condition called paradoxical undressing. Perhaps they panicked, fled the tent, half-dressed, into the night. But hypothermia doesn't crush bones. It doesn't remove tongues. And it doesn't explain the radiation. The katabatic wind theory. Modern science. In 2019, scientists revisited the case. Using snow dynamics from Pixar's Frozen animation models, they simulated a rare kind of mini avalanche known as a katabatic wind slab. It could have caused sudden tent collapse, internal trauma, and disorientation. It's the most logical modern explanation. But even that doesn't fit perfectly. It explains the panic, but not the missing organs, not the glowing lights, not the fear that made them slash their way out into certain death. The Mansi curse and supernatural theories. Local Mansi people warned them not to climb the mountain. They believed spirits protected those peaks and punished trespassers. Some rescuers spoke of finding strange footprints in the snow, not human, not animal. Others swore they felt watched. Myth or paranoia, it depends who you ask. But one truth remains. Years passed. The case closed, reopened, and closed again. In 2019, Russian authorities announced their final conclusion: an avalanche. But to many, it felt like another cover story. Too clean, too convenient. For the families, it was never enough. For scientists, never satisfying. And for storytellers, it remains one of the coldest mysteries ever recorded. The Dyatlov Pass isn't just a case file. It's a mirror, showing us our fear of the unknown, our obsession with answers, and the way nature humbles us when we least expect it. 9 hikers walked into the mountains to prove their strength. Instead, they became part of something larger, a legend carved in ice. Today, hikers still visit Dyatlov Pass. They say at night, when the wind is right, you can hear whispers through the trees, voices calling out, lost in the snow. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe it's the mountain, still keeping its secrets. Because whatever happened that night, the mountain remembers. And it's still whispering. This was True Nightmares. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. And sleep well, if you can. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you are first to know when our next story drops. Avalanche Theory, official Soviet explanation in 2019 reopened investigation. This is the official explanation. Both the initial 1959 Soviet conclusion, vaguely stated, and the 2019 Russian government reinvestigation landed here. The theory: an avalanche or snow slab struck the tent during the night. The sudden impact terrified. Retry. A. Continue. I-fied the hikers, possibly injuring some of them. They cut their way out to escape being buried alive. Once outside, they couldn't return to the tent due to continued avalanche danger. They fled to the forest to seek shelter and build a fire. Hypothermia and injuries led to their deaths. Evidence supporting this theory. The location. The tent was pitched on a slope, exactly where snow accumulation can become unstable. In 2019, Swiss scientists used computer modeling, the same technology Disney used for snow physics in Frozen, to demonstrate that a small slab avalanche could have occurred on this slope under the right conditions. The internal injuries. Lyudmila's and Semyon's crushed ribs could theoretically result from being compressed by heavy snow. The force of accumulated snow can be immense, thousands of pounds of pressure. The tent damage. An avalanche striking the tent could explain why they cut their way out rather than using the entrance. If snow was accumulating rapidly, they might have felt trapped. The rational behavior afterward. They walked calmly away because they knew avalanche protocol. Get away from the danger zone, regroup, survive. The 2019 investigation even identified a rare phenomenon called a delayed slab avalanche, where snow accumulates, becomes unstable, but doesn't release immediately. It could have released hours after they set up camp, in the middle of the night. Evidence against this theory. The searchers found no evidence of an avalanche. When Mikhail Sharavin discovered the tent on February 25th, the tent was still standing, damaged but upright. Snow accumulation around it was consistent with normal wind-driven snowfall, not avalanche deposit. Avalanche debris has a distinctive appearance. Chunks of compacted snow, irregular distribution, signs of violent displacement. None of this was present. The footprints. Avalanche survivors don't leave neat, evenly spaced footprints. They're disoriented, injured, scrambling. The Dyatlov footprints showed organized, purposeful movement. The injuries don't quite match. While snow compression could theoretically cause rib fractures, it doesn't explain the missing eyes and tongue. It doesn't explain the absence of external bruising or wounds. Avalanche victims show signs of trauma, cuts, abrasions, impact marks. The Dyatlov hikers with severe injuries had none. Most critically, experienced mountaineers would never flee an avalanche site without equipment. The standard protocol is to dig out buried members immediately, retrieve essential gear, then retreat to safety with proper clothing and supplies. The Dyatlov group did none of this. They abandoned everything, boots, coats, backpacks, and fled. And why didn't Igor return to the tent if the avalanche danger had passed? Why did 3 hikers die trying to crawl back uphill? If they knew an avalanche had occurred, they'd know the slope was now stable. Avalanches don't strike the same place twice in quick succession. They could have returned safely, unless they weren't fleeing an avalanche at all, unless they were fleeing something else. Katabatic wind/infrasound theory. This is the scientific theory that gained traction in the 2000s. The theory: katabatic winds, cold air masses that flow down mountain slopes, can create powerful localized wind events. Under specific conditions, these winds can generate infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below human hearing range, below 20 Hz. Infrasound has documented psychological effects. It can cause feelings of dread and panic, disorientation, nausea, hallucinations, irrational fear. Perhaps the tent location created the perfect conditions for infrasound generation. The wind screaming across the slope, funneled by the mountain's geometry, created frequencies that induced mass panic. The hikers, suddenly overwhelmed by inexplicable terror, fled. They weren't thinking rationally. They were experiencing acoustic-induced psychosis. Evidence supporting this theory. The location fits. The exposed slope, the wind patterns, the mountain geometry, all consistent with katabatic wind formation. Infrasound effects are real and documented. Laboratory experiments confirm that exposure to certain frequencies causes discomfort and anxiety. It explains the irrational behavior. Why abandon your gear? Why flee to certain death? Because you're not thinking clearly. Your brain is being bombarded with frequencies that trigger primal fear responses. Historical examples exist. In 2003, researchers studying haunted locations found many produced high levels of infrasound, explaining reports of ghost sightings and dread. The tent cuts could have been panic-driven. In their terrified state, Cutting seemed faster than finding the entrance. Evidence against this theory. Infrasound typically affects people differently based on individual sensitivity. It's rare for everyone exposed to experience the same symptoms simultaneously. Yet, all 9 hikers fled together. Experienced mountaineers are trained to recognize and overcome panic. They're taught to stop, assess, think rationally. Even under extreme stress, some instinct toward survival procedures should have kicked in. At least one person should have grabbed boots. The calm footprints again. If they were panicked, disoriented, hallucinating, their footprints would show it. They'd stumble, fall, scatter randomly. Instead, they walked together in an orderly group. And why didn't the effect wear off? Infrasound effects are temporary. Once you move away from the source, symptoms fade. The hikers walked 1.5 kilometers to the tree line. That's plenty of distance, yet they never returned. Never regained rational thinking enough to say, "We need our equipment." Some researchers argue infrasound combined with hypothermia could explain everything. But hypothermia itself causes confusion and irrational behavior. We don't need infrasound to explain it. And it still doesn't explain the physical injuries. Infrasound doesn't crush chests or fracture skulls. Military/KGB cover-up theory. Now we enter conspiracy territory. But is it really conspiracy if there's documented evidence of Soviet military activity in the area? The theory. The Dyatlov group witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. Military testing, missiles, aircraft, weapons, or chemical experiments. Soviet authorities panicked. Either the military killed the hikers to maintain secrecy, or the hikers died accidentally from military causes, and the KGB covered it up. Evidence supporting this theory. The radiation. Low-level radioactive contamination was found on some clothing. This is documented in official reports. Where did it come from? Yuri Krivonischenko worked at Mayak, a secret nuclear facility. Could he have brought contamination with him? Possibly, but contamination was also found on others' clothing. The area was used for military testing. This is not conspiracy. It's historical fact. The Urals contained numerous secret military installations during the Cold War. Witnesses reported strange lights in the sky around the same time. Multiple independent reports from Mansi hunters and another hiking group described orange spheres or lights in the night sky during early February 1959. The rapid case closure. The Soviet government shut down the investigation within weeks. Files were sealed. Why? What were they hiding? The autopsy reports contain strange language. The pathologist describes some injuries as consistent with extreme force, beyond human capability. Why phrase it that way? Semyon Zolotaryov's background. He was a last-minute addition to the group. He was significantly older, a military veteran. Some conspiracy theorists suggest he was a plant, KGB or military intelligence, monitoring the group. When something went wrong, he was eliminated along with the others. Evidence against this theory. The injuries don't match military weapons. Gunshot wounds leave bullets. Explosives leave shrapnel and burns. Chemical weapons leave specific tissue damage. The Dyatlov injuries matched none of these. The low radiation levels aren't dangerous. Beta particle contamination could have come from numerous sources. Camping equipment, watch dials, radium was common, or environmental background radiation. The levels detected were minimal. Why would the military kill them so elaborately? If secrecy was the goal, why not just shoot them and make it look like a hiking accident? Why stage this bizarre scene? The timeline doesn't work. The hikers died February 1st to 2nd. Bodies weren't found until late February and May. If the military killed them, why leave the bodies to be found at all? Why not bury the evidence? The footprints leading from the tent show the hikers fled on their own. There are no additional footprints, no vehicle tracks, no sign of other people. Just 9 sets of footprints leading away. And the tent. If military personnel forced them out, why let them cut the tent? Why not just open it? But here's what keeps this theory alive. The Soviet government absolutely could have been testing something nearby. The lights in the sky are documented by multiple witnesses, and governments do cover up embarrassing incidents. Maybe the military didn't kill them directly. Maybe the hikers witnessed a missile test, panicked, fled, and died of exposure. The government, embarrassed by civilian deaths near a secret facility, buried the truth. It's possible, but it doesn't explain everything. UFO/PARANORMALTHEORY. Yes, we're going here. Because you can't discuss Dyatlov Pass without acknowledging this theory exists. The theory: the hikers encountered something not of this world. UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, paranormal entities, something that defies conventional explanation. Evidence supporting this theory: the lights in the sky. Multiple witnesses reported orange spheres and unusual lights in the region during early February 1959. Not just locals. Another hiking expedition in the area, led by Vladislav Karelin, reported seeing strange glowing orbs on the night of February 1st. The missing soft tissue. Lyudmila's missing eyes and tongue have a macabre parallel to cattle mutilation phenomena, where livestock are found with similar precise removal of soft tissue, often attributed to unproven alien activity. The radiation, alien technology, according to believers, might emit exotic radiation. The compelling natural force language in the official report. Investigators couldn't explain it, maybe because it wasn't natural at all. Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator, gave interviews decades later claiming he'd been pressured to close the case. He stated he personally believed fireballs or unexplained aerial phenomena were involved. He described seeing strange burned patches in the snow, consistent with intense heat, but was ordered not to include these in his report. The injuries. Some UFO theorists suggest directed energy weapons or acoustic weapons of alien origin could cause internal trauma without external wounds. The behavior. Mass exodus from the tent suggests everyone saw or experienced the same phenomenon simultaneously. A craft landing nearby, beings approaching, blinding lights. Evidence against this theory. There's no physical evidence of extraterrestrial involvement. None. No craft debris, no unexplained materials, no technology. The lights in the sky could have been military missiles or rockets. The Soviet Union was actively testing R-7 intercontinental ballistic missiles during this period. Rocket launches can create dramatic light effects visible for hundreds of kilometers. The missing soft tissue has a mundane explanation. Scavenging. Lyudmila was found face down in a stream. Her body was submerged in running water for 3 months. Soft tissue deteriorates first. Eyes and tongues are preferred by scavengers, birds, small mammals. The ravine bodies were exposed to wildlife. Radiation has earthly explanations, as discussed earlier. The compelling natural force language might simply be bureaucratic vagueness. Soviet officials writing a report they couldn't fully explain, using broad language to avoid admitting ignorance. And the behavior? Mass panic has human causes. You don't need aliens to explain fear. But here's why this theory persists. Because it's unfalsifiable. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove aliens weren't there. And in the absence of a satisfying explanation, humans gravitate toward the extraordinary. The lights remain unexplained. The injuries remain unusual. The mystery remains. And mysteries attract speculation. Yeti/indigenous creature theory. This theory sounds ridiculous. Until you learn about the context. The theory. The hikers encountered a Yeti, an almasti, or some unknown hominid creature in the wilderness. It attacked them, causing the panic and injuries. Evidence supporting this theory. Mansi legends describe creatures in these mountains. Large, bipedal, aggressive. The Mansi have avoided certain areas for generations, claiming they belong to the forest people. Footprints of unusual size and shape have been reported in the Urals. Unclear photographs exist. Reports persist. The injuries could theoretically come from a large animal attack. Bears can cause massive trauma, but bears hibernate in February. The group's panic could have been triggered by a large creature approaching their tent. They flee. The creature pursues or continues attacking. Rustem's skull fracture, Nikolai's skull fracture, Lyudmila's and Semyon's chest trauma, all consistent with being struck or grappled by something strong. Evidence against this theory. No animal tracks were found near the tent or bodies. None. Just the hikers' footprints. Animal attacks leave clear signs. Blood trails, drag marks, bite wounds, claw marks. The Dyatlov injuries show none of these. An animal powerful enough to crush a human ribcage would leave external wounds. Bears maul. Predators tear flesh. The internal trauma without external damage doesn't match any known animal attack pattern. And the tent. An animal wouldn't cause 9 people to cut their way out and flee in unison. Animal attacks create chaos. People scatter in different directions. Some try to fight. Some freeze. The systematic nature of the footprints, walking together, orderly, contradicts animal attack scenarios. But folklore persists for a reason. Something in these mountains scared the Mansi ancestors enough to create lasting legends. The hikers died on a mountain literally named Mountain of the Dead. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the mountain earned its name. Paradoxical undressing/hypothermia psychosis theory. This is the most mundane theory, and perhaps the most tragic. The theory. The hikers experienced a cascade of cold-related emergencies leading to death. No external threat, just cold, confusion, and bad decisions compounding into catastrophe. Here's how it might have happened. Something minor occurs. A small snow accumulation on the tent, a support pole breaking, carbon monoxide buildup from their stove. Nothing life-threatening, but concerning. They decide to exit the tent to assess the situation. In their haste, they cut their way out, faster than unbuttoning the entrance in the dark. Outside in the extreme cold and darkness, they make a critical error. They move too far from the tent. Perhaps the wind is so strong they need to retreat to the tree line to communicate. Perhaps they're checking something downslope. Within minutes, they realize they can't return. The cold has numbed their extremities. The wind is too strong. Someone is already showing signs of hypothermia. They make the survival decision. Get to the forest build a fire, wait out the storm. At the tree line, they build a fire using the cedar tree's branches. But the fire isn't enough. Hypothermia sets in rapidly. Paradoxical undressing occurs, a well-documented phenomenon where hypothermia victims feel intensely hot in the final stages and remove their clothing. This explains why some were found barely dressed. The two Yuris die first at the fire. The others, desperate, remove clothing from the corpses to stay warm. Igor, Zina, and Rustem attempt to return to the tent, but die en route, their bodies shutting down. The final four seek shelter in the ravine, trying to create a snow cave or protected area. But they're too weak, too cold. They collapse. Snow accumulates, compressing their bodies, causing the internal injuries post-mortem. Evidence supporting this theory. Hypothermia explains most of the behavioral abnormalities. Confusion, irrational decision-making, paradoxical undressing, all documented effects. No external threat is necessary. Occam's razor suggests the simplest explanation is often correct. The injuries could be post-mortem. Months under heavy snow could compress bodies, fracture frozen bones, cause tissue damage. This theory requires no military cover-up, no aliens, no mysterious forces. Just cold and bad luck. Evidence against this theory. It doesn't explain why they cut the tent. If they were simply going outside to check something, why destroy their shelter? It doesn't explain the orderly retreat. Hypothermic people don't walk calmly in a group. They stumble, fall, become disoriented. The severe injuries, particularly the chest and skull fractures, are inconsistent with snow compression on bodies. Forensic experts have stated these injuries required significant force applied to living tissue. Frozen corpses don't fracture the same way. The missing eyes and tongue remain unexplained, though scavenging is plausible. And most critically, these were experienced hikers. They'd trained for exactly these conditions. They'd survived winter expeditions before. Would they really make such catastrophically poor decisions? Unless something compromised their judgment beyond normal hypothermia. Unless fear was involved. Unless they were fleeing something. So where does this leave us? 9 theories. 9 explanations. None complete? Each theory explains pieces of the puzzle while leaving others unsolved. The truth might be a combination. Military testing caused lights and panic. Infrasound amplified their fear. They fled in hypothermic confusion. Some died of exposure, others were injured by a small avalanche in the ravine. Or maybe the truth is simpler, stranger, or more terrible than any theory suggests. Maybe the answer isn't missing because of a cover-up or lack of evidence. Maybe it's missing because what happened on that mountain was genuinely unprecedented. A perfect storm of circumstances that will never be replicated. A unique convergence of weather, psychology, geography, and chance that killed 9 people and left us with an unsolvable riddle. Or maybe, and this is what keeps people obsessed, maybe we've never considered the right explanation at all. Maybe the truth is still out there, buried in the snow, waiting for someone to find it. Modern investigations. The story doesn't end in 1959. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remained a footnote in Soviet history. The case files were classified. Families were told to stop asking questions. The mountain was forbidden territory. But secrets don't stay buried forever. In the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, researchers gained access to archived documents. Files were unsealed, autopsy reports, photographs, investigator notes, all released to the public. And the mystery exploded into global consciousness. Books were published, documentaries produced, websites dedicated to analyzing every detail. The Dyatlov Pass became one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in the world. In 2000, Russian journalist and researcher Alexander Koshkin published extensive analysis of the case files, highlighting inconsistencies in the official investigation. In 2013, Donnie Eichar published Dead Mountain, a comprehensive investigation that proposed the infrasound theory after consulting with scientists and visiting the site. Yuri Yudin, the only survivor, gave numerous interviews before his death in 2013. He maintained until the end that he believed something extraordinary happened, something beyond natural explanation, but he couldn't say what. And then, in 2019, something unprecedented happened. The Russian government reopened the case. 60 years after the incident, Russian authorities announced a new investigation. Public pressure had mounted. Modern forensic techniques offered new possibilities. And the mystery had become an international embarrassment. A case so famous that Russia's inability to solve it damaged credibility. The new investigation team included forensic experts, avalanche specialists, computer modelers, engineers from Zurich's Swiss Federal Institute. They analyzed the original evidence with modern tools. They performed new studies. They even created computer simulations of potential avalanche scenarios. Their conclusion, published in 2020, delayed slab avalanche. The team argued that a rare type of snow accumulation could have formed on the slope, releasing hours after the tent was pitched. The impact wouldn't have been catastrophic. Not a massive avalanche, but a localized snow slab. Enough to strike the tent, panic the hikers, and cause some injuries. They published their findings in Communications, Earth and Environment, a nature journal. The research included sophisticated modeling showing how such an avalanche could occur even on a relatively gentle slope under specific wind and snow conditions. But the backlash was immediate. Critics pointed out the same problems. No avalanche evidence at the scene, unexplained injuries, irrational behavior. Independent researchers noted that the simulation required very specific conditions that may not have existed that night. And the families of the victims rejected the conclusion. They argued it was another cover-up, a bureaucratic closure of an embarrassing case, not a real answer. In 2021, National Geographic produced a documentary investigating the case using modern forensic techniques. They consulted biomechanical experts about the injuries, concluding that the chest trauma was consistent with avalanche compression, but admitting significant uncertainties remained. In 2022, Russian prosecutor Alexander Kuryakov officially closed the case again, citing the avalanche explanation. But is it closed? Not really. Because modern investigations, for all their technology and expertise, still can't explain everything. They can't explain why experienced hikers fled without equipment. They can't explain the neat footprints. They can't definitively prove an avalanche occurred when physical evidence suggests it didn't. What modern investigations have done is narrow the possibilities. They've ruled out some theories as highly unlikely. They've provided scientific context for phenomena like infrasound and hypothermia. But they haven't solved the mystery, and perhaps they never will. Because some questions don't have answers. Some events sit at the intersection of too many variables. Too many unknowns. Too much time passed. The truth died with 9 young people on a frozen mountain in 1959. Everything else is just theory, just speculation, just us, desperate to make sense of the senseless. Psychological and symbolic analysis. Why are we obsessed with this story? Why does the Dyatlov Pass incident captivate millions of people decades after it happened? There are thousands of unsolved mysteries, thousands of tragic deaths. But something about this one refuses to let go. Let's examine what this mystery represents. The fear of nature's indifference. At its core, the Dyatlov Pass story confronts us with a terrifying truth. Nature doesn't care about us. These weren't careless tourists. They were trained, prepared, experienced. They did everything right. And they died anyway. That's horrifying. We want to believe that preparation equals safety, that competence prevents catastrophe, that following the rules protects us. The Dyatlov incident shatters that illusion. It says, you can be smart, strong, careful, and the mountain will kill you anyway. That randomness, that cosmic indifference, terrifies us more than any monster. The mystery of consciousness. Something made 9 people simultaneously decide to abandon their shelter and walk to their deaths. What was it? We can theorize about panic, hypothermia, infrasound. But we'll never know what they experienced subjectively in those final moments. What did they feel? What did they see? What convinced them together that leaving the tent was their only option? Those internal experiences died with them. We're left staring at the evidence, footprints in snow, trying to reconstruct thoughts and emotions that are forever lost. It's a reminder of how isolated each consciousness is. How much of human experience is trapped inside individual minds, inaccessible to others. When those minds die, that experience vanishes. We'll never know what it was like to be inside that tent on February 1st, 1959. And that absence is haunting. The conspiracy mind. The Dyatlov Pass has become a Rorschach test for worldview. If you distrust government, you see cover-up and military involvement. If you believe in the paranormal, you see evidence of UFOs or unknown phenomena. If you value scientific explanations, you gravitate toward avalanche or infrasound theories. The mystery accommodates all interpretations. It's ambiguous enough that everyone can project their beliefs onto it. This is why it spreads. It's mimetic. It confirms priors while resisting definitive closure. In an age of information overload, where we're drowning in data, the Dyatlov Pass offers something paradoxical. A story where we have extensive evidence, but no answer. That fascinates us. We're used to Google solving every question in seconds. But the Dyatlov Pass remains unsolved despite decades of investigation. It's a puzzle that defeats our information age, and that makes it irresistible. The power of visual evidence. Part of the obsession comes from the photographs. We see their faces, young, smiling, alive. We see them building fires, skiing through snow, laughing together. These aren't distant historical figures. They're real people with documented lives, captured on film. And then we see the aftermath. The torn tent, the frozen bodies, the evidence markers in the snow. That visual journey from life to death creates emotional investment. We know these people, or feel like we do. We've seen them happy, and then we see what happened to them. It's intimate, personal, tragic. The unanswered question as art. There's something almost beautiful about an unsolved mystery. Not beautiful in the tragedy, that's horrible, but beautiful in its resistance to closure, its refusal to be neatly packaged. The Dyatlov Pass is like a poem with missing lines, a painting with an obscured center, a song that ends mid-phrase. We fill in the gaps with imagination. Every theory, every speculation, every late-night Reddit thread. These are creative acts. Attempts to complete the narrative, to restore meaning to chaos. Maybe the Dyatlov Pass isn't about what happened to them. Maybe it's about what it awakens in us. Our fear of the unknown, our need for answers, our refusal to accept that some things will never make sense. 9 young lives walked into the wilderness in February 1959. None walked out. Their story has been told and retold for 66 years, analyzed, theorized, debated. It's been the subject of books, documentaries, films, countless articles. Millions of people know their names now. Igor, Zina, Lyudmila, Rustem, the 2 Yuris, Semyon, Alexander, Nikolai. They're famous, immortalized by mystery. But they didn't want to be mysteries. They wanted to climb a mountain, to test themselves, to push boundaries, to return home with stories and photographs and memories. They wanted to live. Instead, they became symbols, puzzles, evidence in an investigation that will never close. Their last moments on that mountain remain unknowable. We can speculate, theorize, simulate, but we'll never know what they felt, what they saw, what drove them from their tent into the dark. Was it avalanche, wind, fear, something else? The mountain knows, the snow knows. The wind that still screams across that slope knows. But they're not telling. Sometimes I think about Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, the one who lived. He spent over 50 years carrying the weight of that goodbye. 50 years wondering what he missed, what he avoided, why them and not him. He gave interviews. He answered questions. He returned to the mountain multiple times, standing at the site where the tent was found, staring at the slope. Searching for something, an answer, closure, peace. He never found it. In his final interview before his death, someone asked him, "What do you think happened?" He paused, his eyes distant.
I don't know,
He said quietly.
but I think about them every single day. I see their faces. I hear their voices. And I wonder, what would I have done? If I'd been there? If I'd been in that tent? Would I have survived? Would I have understood what was happening?
He shook his head.
I'll never know. And that's my burden. To live with not knowing.
The Dyatlov Pass Incident isn't just about 9 deaths. It's about the survivors, the families, the investigators, the obsessives like us, watching videos, reading articles, trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. It's about humanity's need for answers in a universe that doesn't always provide them. It's about the terror of randomness, the fragility of life, the thin line between adventure and tragedy. And maybe, just maybe, it's about accepting that some questions don't have answers, that some mysteries will remain mysteries, that some darkness will never be illuminated. The tent still stands in our imagination, torn open, empty, Wind howling through the cuts. Footprints still lead away into the forest, preserved forever in photographs and memories. And 9 young people still walk through the snow, forever frozen in that final journey, never reaching safety, never finding warmth. Whatever happened that night on Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead, it's still happening. In our minds, in our questions, in our refusal to let them be forgotten. Because remembering them is all we can do now. Remembering that they lived, that they laughed, that they were young and brave and full of hope. And that something we may never understand, took that all away in a single night. The wind still knows, and it's still whispering. If you listen closely, if you're brave enough, you can almost hear them. 9 voices in the dark, still calling, still walking, still searching for a warmth they'll never find. Remember their names. Igor Dyatlov, 23, Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, Lyudmila Dubinina, 21, Rustem Slobodin, 23, Yuri Doroshenko, 21, Yuri Krivonishenko, 24, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 24, Alexander Kolovatov, 24, Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, and the one who survived. Yuri Yudin, 1959 to 2013. May their story never be forgotten. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you are first to know when our next story drops.